for another episode, man. Our Wednesday episode, 6 p.m. Eastern time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Just a quick little update. And also, I saw someone else do a show. If you're in here on the Bleacher Report chat, man, make sure you get in there. Click the fire emoji. Shout out to TD. I never thought to say that. Like people say, click the like button on YouTube. On Bleacher Report, is click the fire emoji. So, if you see that, click the fire emoji. Now, today, man, this feels weird because I was trying to come up with a good topic for today, and I think everything's for me is kind of transitioned into draft. There's a little bit happening with free agency, so I always try to find different names. But over the last 2-3 days, free agency in terms of the Lions has just kind of went crazy a little bit. Like not big out-of-house names, but just bringing back their own players. We've seen that pile up over the last few days, and I think this is a great opportunity to kind of catch up on all of the moves that have been made recently over the last few days, players that they have brought back and re-signed to the roster. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about those guys, bringing them back, what that means for the roster. And then there's also a little side note that we'll throw in here as well. Not even a side note, but Easy actually sent me this, and it's a player that the Lions apparently brought in for a visit. It's a tight end, another tight end. Yes, another tight end the Lions brought in for a visit. We'll see if it happens. I got to be honest, just a quick disclaimer. I don't think that's like a bringing him in for a visit. That's a big time signing. Like, no, if they sign him, it's going to be for competition. I think right now, most of these players are that. These feel like competition spots where you're bringing in a player truly to compete within the specific room that they're in. And I think tight end right now is going to be one of the most entertaining battles that we're going to see throughout the offseason. Like, I think that's where it's loading up to be. The Lions bring in Kenny Yeboah. I think we talked about that last week, but we had the Kenny Yeboah video. Then today they go out and they bring in Shane Zylstra. They bring him back. That's on top of having Brock Wright and Sam Laporta. And I'm saying it's probably less likely now that the Lions do draft a tight end, but I don't think tight end's a bad group this year. I think it's a strong group, especially if you get to day 2 and you decide to take one. There's a couple guys I'd even take a flyer on late, but I think at worst, they're going to sign a UDFA tight end. At worst, they're going to sign a UDFA tight end. So for me, tight end is going to be one of the most underappreciated maybe battles that we're going to have to look forward to as this training camp and all the offseason programs kick off for tight end number 3, because we know what 1 and 2 are, but for tight end 3, and specifically who can add value in different spots, who can kick back to fullback when we decide to do that, right? There's that option because Shane Zylstra did it, who we're going to talk about today. Brock Wright did as well. Who adds special teams value? And then what style of tight end are they looking for? Is it more of the receiving threat? Is it more of your blocker? Because, man, this is going to be this position group is kind of loaded. I think they're going to continue to add guys to it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And we also have a new tight end coach, which I guess adds a little bit to the mystery as well, potentially. So with that being said, let's dive right into it. I do have like an overlay, like of kind of like just a group of clips here, but I just did it all into one. That way I'm not like trying to highlight certain things to look at. Instead, it's just like a highlight reel of players. I thought that would be a good way to kind of put this together, is essentially show like a highlight reel of players. So we will do that as we go through this. But let's start right there first. Shane Zylstra has been re-signed by the Detroit Lions. And this was a move that, let me get this off. This was a move that I thought the Lions were going to make and get done a while ago. Like I thought a while ago the Lions were going to bring in Shane Zylstra, and then it didn't happen initially. So I was a little unsure. I wasn't sure if they were actually going to bring in Shane Zylstra. I thought they would. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, hopefully we're good there. I did not mean to. Okay, we're good. We're good. Yeah. Okay. Click wrong button. But anyways, yeah, I thought they were going to bring back Shane Zylstra immediately. Like as soon as the offseason started, I thought he was going to be someone that they would target because tight end was so weak in terms of free agency. I mean, you even look at the names that are out there now, it's not like a loaded tight end room. So I thought they were going to prioritize bringing back Shane Zylstra, and it took a little while, but he's back. Shane Zylstra is back with the Lions. And I had to go back last year because I remember in the preseason, one thing that stood out to me was Shane Zylstra because he had the year off. Remember, he missed not like on purpose, but on 2023, he had the injury, missed the entire year of 2023. And that was the year that felt like if he was going to take that next step, it was going to be that season specifically, because 2022, he was coming off 11 receptions, 13 targets, 4 touchdowns. And he was kind of like coming out of a shell as a receiving tight end for the Lions. And when you have Brock Wright, and then of course you add, at that time, we didn't have him, but you add Sam Laporta. It was, who's that next guy that brings some juice as a separator, as a tight end that can get open and actually make plays in receiving game? And he was that guy. And he was that guy in 2022. And I think 2023, we saw the offseason program. I remember going to, I think that was the year I ended up going to OTAs. Like the first time they were kind of having it open to the public. I got invited to go to that. Shout out to Michael Banks. And I remember him just cooking. I mean, he was the guy. It was like, wow, this guy looks awesome on offense. And there felt like there was a real connection there. And then he misses 23 with the injury. It was devastating when it happened. He goes back this past year, and he kind of goes under the radar. You know, he actually had a solid amount of snaps. I mean, he didn't play a lot of snaps, but he played a little bit, and he kind of went under the radar. He only had the 1 reception for 22 yards. He had like a little underneath route, which, again, by the way, got a little bit of pocket movement, kind of stepped up in the pocket, found him underneath. It was a check down. He picked up 22 yards, simply just what he did after the catch. And I do think, though, if you just watch him running routes, the route running that we saw from this last season, even when he wasn't getting the football, I think there was a lot of things to kind of buy into there. And especially when you compare him straight up to Kenny Yeboah and you compare him to the tight end that we're going to talk about a little bit later here that's coming in for a bit, that came in for a visit or that visited with the Lions, he's different. He's a better separator than those guys. He showed a ton of athleticism this past season as a route runner specifically. Now, as a blocker, that's the area that I thought he got better. I remember going back to the preseason, I thought pass protection was better, and that's never really been Shane Zylstra's game. He's always a little bit undersized, 6'3", 240. That's how he's listed. That's never really been his thing. And it was like, well, if that was more of a part of his game, it would be hard to just not keep him as tight end 3, because that's the only thing that, and it's a big thing, but it's like the real thing that's like, okay, we don't completely buy into this because we know that he's a better route runner typically than who our tight end 3 is. And I thought last season he improved there. Now, through the regular season, I don't think there's a big enough sample to look at. But I think the biggest thing that he showed during the regular season was run blocking. He was a successful move blocker for the Lions this past season. I wouldn't say he was great, right? He wasn't a people mover, as I listed Kenny Yeboah, but he was successful as a move blocker on the run. Of course, we use him in a ton of motion. He's a guy that gets moved all around pre-snap. And when we got him out in space, we saw it on screens. There was effectiveness. There was some sustain when he got in space and he was blocking. So this past season, specifically for me, I mean, what did he run? 28 routes, I think he ran this past season. He was kind of used as like our number 3 tight end. At times, we went to those full, like heavy 3 tight end sets, or we went jumbo 12 personnel. We had 2 tight ends out there. He'd be one of the tight ends. But his ability to line in different spots, that's because of his ability to open up a variety in terms of the route tree that he can run, which is much deeper than what Kenny Yeboah will bring or what the guy we're going to talk about, Morris, can bring to the table as well. He's got a more diverse route tree. So there's always a value for that role. And I do think that, again, at tight end in this year in free agency was just not good. It just, there wasn't a lot of options. And what that does is it makes the top players in free agency cost a ton of money. And there was really no middle ground in free agency. It was kind of like, all right, you sign a prove it guy or you bring your guys back. And that's where Shane Zylstra, for me, constantly was like, I got to bring him back. There's just no other options out there. I didn't feel any other options out there. So ultimately, I think getting him back makes a ton of sense. And we know because his route tree is a little bit more diverse, it's because of the speed that he has. He's got adequate speed when he's kind of running the seam specifically. As I touched on, I thought he was an improved blocker. He's got some agility. It's plus agility. He can create some change of direction. We see more complex routes when he's working underneath specifically than some of these other tight ends will. Like, you'll get some guys that are just drag threats. They're going to run drags, right? They may push the seam vertically, but that's pretty much the extent of their route tree. There's a little bit more than that to Shane Zylstra specifically. Now, that doesn't mean I think it's perfect or he's the best route runner, but you even see it when he sticks at the top of his routes, ability to kind of create separation. There's a little bit of a burst there. He can really get flat to the line of scrimmage or, flat down the line that he's working out of his breaks, which allows him to create some separation. So ultimately, like, it's not the best route runner. I didn't think he showed a ton of burst all the time. I didn't think he showed always the most quickness when working off the ball. And you'll see that with some of these bigger, more explosive tight ends specifically. But then the big key to that, and the last thing I want to leave it on here with Shane Zylstra is, I touched on this right at the beginning, right? Brock Wright played some fullback for us last year. I think the Lions are going to utilize a fullback this next year. Shane Zylstra did a little bit too. It wasn't much. It probably got a little bit overlooked, but his success as a move blocker, they put him at fullback. Now, I thought when he was there, it wasn't like he ran over a linebacker or anything like that. He probably took the brunt of the contact, if anything. But ultimately, he did show that, okay, like as a move blocker specifically, I can be capable here, especially on some of the wider runs. I can be your lead blocker specifically. So overall, like level 3 routes don't separate as like a maybe Sam Laporta would, like, or even level 2 routes when he's getting out of his breaks to maintain speed. But ultimately, he's a better route runner that brings more diversity. And of course, he brought a little bit more after the catch. And I just feel like he always has a good connection with Goff. There always feels like there's a nice connection there, and he separates late. I think Shane Zylstra being brought back is a real possibility that he makes the team this year. But as I said, this is going to be a heck of a battle at tight end 3 as we head into this offseason. Now, Mr. Reliable. I don't know if I want to call him that. That feels like not the right nickname. I don't like. He actually fumbled last season, so actually this doesn't feel like the right nickname. But I don't know what to call him. What's the nickname, chat? What do we call Craig Reynolds? I don't know what we call Craig Reynolds. Probably not Mr. Reliable. I would say maybe more Mr. Consistency. Craig Reynolds is exactly the same guy, it feels like, every single season. And that's not a bad thing. It's not like Craig Reynolds is out there and he's not improving, I want to say, but he also has a relatively high floor in a sense that you know exactly what you're going to get. And Craig Reynolds is pretty much the same guy production-wise every single season when he gets the ball. And then we saw him this past season. He was the same guy. Now, I think a couple of years ago, we saw him kind of take off when he had the opportunity. I thought he was great when we went to the gap scheme and he could follow pullers and he could really lean behind that. And we did see this past season, like our all line, like for example, you watch him against Dallas, even San Fran, when those guys are dominant like they are, which occasionally they were with Craig Reynolds, it feels like you could kind of put anybody back there and you're going to have success. Like the lanes on some of his bigger runs were just I mean, they were massive. And it's a shout out to that offensive line. But Craig Reynolds averaged 4.5 yards per carry again last season. Every single season, I think he's been with the Lions, he's averaged over 2.5 yards after contact. Like that's just what he is. And I think that I've always loved the vision for Craig because I think it's led to that consistency. But I think we even saw this past season, his uptick in terms of the zone rushing scheme showed that, okay, I'm capable of being flexible. Like, it's not like I fit to like, oh, if you only run this style, then I'm going to have problems. I think as a wide zone scheme, there's a little bit of pushback there because he can't get to the square to the line of scrimmage, I think, as quickly, which causes him to kind of be running on an angle, which can limit it. But as an outside zone, inside zone, power runner downhill, you get him in a gap scheme and he's patient. He pretty much checks all the boxes from a vision perspective there, where you're going to get a lot of consistency. And I think that ability to open up that I can work in a lot of different run schemes specifically is a huge reason why the Lions are consistently interested in having him back. And there is a special teams value. We always see him on kick return, for example. He definitely has that value too. And I think worst case, you look at that and say, all right, we trust him on special teams. We trust him when he's out there. But overall, like if you look at him this past season, and you just watch him play this past season, you would see some of the body control as a running back specifically. You'd see some of the change of direction body control and how smooth that he would work, working through gas specifically. And I just think he excelled as a zone runner this past year, which I didn't think coming into this year that's what he was best at, but I think it showed off this year. I always bring up the fact that this guy was a big-time receiving threat, and while there wasn't much volume here, he did have 3 receptions last year for 40 yards. He had a pretty big reception this past season, I believe. So he's always kind of had that background where he has some hands. Like he's not the separator, but he always has some hands. And I think that shows up for a reason. We know there's limitations athletically, like, hey, can he get to the corner? Yeah, not really. But you'll get runs like we saw, I think it was against Dallas, where something gets blown up in the backfield. He's got the control, kind of stops himself, and he flips the field. And it's like, oh, there he goes. He's taking off. He may not get to the corner, but he's going to constantly fall forward. He plays low, so it allows him to kind of sneak through some smaller gaps and to constantly fall forward. I don't think he has the make you miss of other guys. It's more so just the way that he follows through his blocks for consistency. He's always working downhill. He just doesn't have some of the creativity with the ball, right? And you see it in traffic too. He doesn't have some of the short area quickness where it's like, oh man, he's just kind of hopping over arm tackles and things like that. I don't ever really get that sense with him. You don't really see the burst specifically as well, but he doesn't have much false movement. Everything's super fluid with Craig Reynolds. So ultimately, Craig is a guy where I don't think anybody's and I don't want to mean this in a bad way, but when he comes in, I don't think anybody's like, yo, let's go. Craig Reynolds about to cook. But every time you watch him, oh, that's pretty good. He's doing he's taking advantage of what's there. And then he'll have some of those runs. You're like, that was pretty awesome. I don't know how he did that, how he pulled that off. But he's so balanced as a running back that's what he is. He plays with a great pace. So for me, Craig Reynolds is steady. Craig Reynolds is super steady, and it's great to have him back. Now we're going to get to Morris here in a second. I'm going to save him for last. Okay. We got a couple of more players that we're going to dive into, but I want to save him for last. Let's go to the defense side of the ball because we essentially re-signed our entire backup defensive line. I mean, if you think about it, if you throw Miles Bryant or Miles Adams into the mix, outside of Za'Darius Smith, our entire second half of the season backup defensive line has now been re-signed. Okay. Outside of Za'Darius, which is weird, but that's what it is. Now, some of these, I think I'm more excited than others. We don't have the contract details. I don't want to say more excited, but some of them I have different expectations, I should say. So, as a quick rundown, for example, Mitchell Agude, I'm okay with having him back. Do I think he's going to make the roster? I don't think it's a lock at all. I think re-signing him is, I don't want to call him a camp body, but it's competition. I mean, that's what it is. It's okay, maybe bottom of the roster spot, likely practice squad type of piece potentially. I wouldn't give him a great shot to make the 53, but I don't have any issue with bringing him back, and that specifically stems from what he did in the preseason and the versatility that he brings, and we'll get to him more in a second. But then also recently, and I think the most recent re-signing we had was Al-Quadin Muhammad, and I know I can't say his name properly, so let me just leave it there. But bringing Muhammad back is actually a guy that I think could make the 53. I think he has a chance to make the 53. And I think that's a super sneaky re-signing. I said Miles Adams was sneaky, but I think he's a really interesting re-signing. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. But especially, I think when you think about moving off Za'Darius and some of the knocks that you could point to in his game, Muhammad is a little bit of a different animal. And I think some of that kind of gives you a little bit of a tell based on this move, because it's not like Muhammad's 24 years old. You're like, man, I'm baking on the upside. What is this guy going to turn into? Muhammad's 30 years old. He's not super young. So we're going to get to him, but I think it tells a lot when we talk about what he did. But let's start with Agude first, because Agude this past season, he played 40 snaps in the regular season for the Lions. So he didn't play much. But you know that all of his snaps came against NFC North teams. I don't know if y'all know that. Every snap that he played came against either the Vikings, Bears, or Packers. He played 3 games there, all different games, all against the NFC North teams. And when I went back through, I was just trying to kind of remind myself, because in the preseason, he ended up playing He ended up playing 70, what was it, 74 snaps, 79 snaps, somewhere in that range. He played more snaps in the preseason, but ultimately, like he walked away with a solid amount of pressures. He came away with 4 pressures, which was an area that I think he stood out there. But he was well rounded. He'd play the run well. He could do things in coverage. There was flexibility, there was fluidity within his game. And then when I went back to the regular season, I'm like, all right, what caught the Lions' eye here? And for me, he's a pretty good athlete, right? You see like short area quickness, short area change of direction. You get some agility. You see the way that he kind of centers himself into blocks. You'll see some of that. I think he's got adequate speed when working down the line of scrimmage. You can put him on the backside. You could have him be a contained player. You can also have him read the mesh point, play that throughout, and also staying flat to the line of scrimmage. He can move down laterally. He's capable in those spots as well, working flat to the line of scrimmage. There is some suddenness, and I think, again, that short area quickness. Now, I think this shows up more as a run blocker, but it also shows up as a pass rusher in the sense of, I think Agude, who is one of the younger players that we did bring back, and again, I think I wouldn't bet on him making the 53 if I'm being honest, but there's a chance. I do think that there's a lot that it has not been tapped into. Like, it's not like I watch Agude and think, man, he's so polished, he just isn't athletic enough. Like, he's not a freaky athlete, but he's definitely capable in terms of what we've gotten out of Muhammad. He's capable as an athlete. The big thing there is I just think there's so much that needs development, specifically as a pass rusher. So much that needs to come along there. So I don't have any problem with bringing him back just to let him compete again, potentially put together and stack good preseasons together, because that's mattered. Having good preseasons have mattered, specifically if you're healthy. And at some point, those guys, they do ultimately take over. At some point, we do see that happen. I think the big thing here is effort. He's an effort player. Like in regular season, I think that's where he shined the most. Just tracking dudes down, just running out on screens, 30 yards down the field. He's racing guys down. I think there was a 58-yard run against Minnesota. I think it was that run, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe not been that one, but it was like a 50-yard run this past season. May have been that one. And he was chasing it. I don't think he made the play, but that's kind of what you get out of Agude. So I feel like you're always going to get those things specifically. And he's got an effective enough footwork in terms of the depth that he can cover, where I think there's variety that he can open as a pass rusher. We just haven't seen those things really connect yet. I feel like when I watch him, it doesn't feel that connected, or the plan doesn't feel great. But ultimately, there's like enough movement there. We're like, okay, I could see that winning. I could see that having success. And you can understand why he has more success in the preseason against tackles that probably aren't going to be playing against you in the regular season that are also doing the same thing. So it gives you like a baseline to build on. You're like, all right, this is obviously he's a plus. He's a plus player in the preseason. Can he develop to the point where he can be a sufficient player in the regular season, right? Can he play against regular season teams and bring us value, or at very least like hold the line? And I don't think last year he did, but ultimately in the preseason, I think there was enough there to grab onto. Now, I definitely had a plenty of knocks here that I can go into specifically. One, I don't think he's super strong within his base. I think you'll see that as a run defender. You would even see with like a spin moves. Like, I mean, they just slowed down so much. There was no suddenness. There was no urgency when you saw him working a spin moves. And that's, to me, back to the plan side of things, just kind of dialing that in. He could be inaccurate when he's trying to set an edge as a run defender. He's not very heavy within his hands specifically either. I like how his frame is built. He's built out pretty well rounded to be a run support, pass rusher, and also drop into coverage. He's built pretty well for flexibility. There's not a lot of punch power. I don't feel like there's a lot of shake to open pads. Just overall, I bring him in and I say, okay, this is more preseason competition. Let's see if we can take another step. Can we take another step? Because right now, if you get the same Agude you got last year, he's not making the team. I bet on that. However, can he take the next step? He's one of the young guys that we're bringing back here. So I have no problem with it. I guess on paper right now, he adds us defensive end depth, but this is preseason competition. And anybody that performs well in the preseason, I got no problem with bringing it back, especially when they're younger like this, because you're trying to get somewhere with it. Now, the last two that we have before we get to hey, I see y'all in here. And the last two we have before we get to Morris here. And I don't want to spend too much time on Morris, but we will touch on it. Pat O'Connor. Let's go to Pat O'Connor. This is another one that was kind of like Shane Zylstra, where you just look at it and you're like, are they not going to bring back Pat O'Connor? Like, you couldn't help yourself. It just felt weird. It was like, are they really not going to bring back Pat O'Connor? Why would they not bring back Pat O'Connor? And ultimately, they did bring back Pat O'Connor. And this just, you got to bring back Pat O'Connor. Like, there's certain guys that, like, Pat O'Connor's weird because it's like, I don't know what he's best at. You can make the case that he was his best as a nose tackle, but obviously there's major limitations there. And some of those things you don't think are going to get better. But where he has his highest ceiling feels like it's also at nose tackle, because when he makes big plays, like, oh, you put him at nose. He's too quick for guys off the ball. He can play with some leverage, get upfield. It's like, all right, I could see this. So he's in a weird spot. And I really don't know what his path is to getting consistent playing time outside of just guys getting hurt. And I also don't know what the heck position that you put him in terms of like, this is the best spot for him. I would think based on his ability, he's a defensive end. but I don't know that that's been his best spot. I think his build says put him at defensive end, but he was best at nose tackle. That's where he got to his ceiling. So ultimately, it's kind of a weird player to figure out what he's going to be his best at. He's 31 years old, but there's no doubt that Pat O'Connor earned, and we're going to see what the deal comes in for me, another opportunity in the preseason, like another opportunity to just see what it looks like. Like, does he find a spot that actually is his home? Because you got to give credit to him. The Lions were trying to figure out backup nose tackle last year, and ultimately we know they kind of went with Chris Smith, right, to back up DJ Reader. But let's also like give credit to Pat O'Connor. Pat O'Connor was holding that down. That dude should not be playing nose tackle, and he was holding it down. And then he played three technique for us. He played defensive tackle. Then Miles Adams kicked side. It's like, dude, you got to give credit to the guy that just finds a way to make it work. And I think what he did really well is he really leaned into what he did well, and he put that on full display. Like the first step timing was massive. That's really the Green Bay Packers game where he kind of put that on display. He got the lineup over their center. I mean, he's hugging up on the ball. He's shooting off the line with good timing consistently, and it's causing him to be a half-man disruptor. You know, he's splitting gaps a little bit, shows some slither. He's got active feet, which allow him to keep working on stunts, but allows him to kind of find creases and get upfield specifically. And this is where it shows up even as a run defender, where he doesn't even have his footwork under him or he's getting pushed off a spot, but he still kind of feels what he's supposed to do. I think that's the thing that you do like with Pat O'Connor is he understands his assignment. He's going to get there. At very worst, he's going to get there. Like it may not look great how he does it. He may not go above and beyond, but he's going to get to where he's supposed to be. And that adds reliability to his game. He's leveraged as a player a ton. He plays with fantastic leverage, and this shows up as a bull rusher. Now, my problem is he doesn't have much leg drive, which is definitely a problem. He can't really play gap and a half and have much success pushing guys across gaps. He can kind of settle into coming back to his leverage. I've seen him handle guards one-on-one and kind of hold his ground, but is he going to play beyond his ground? Not really. Like I haven't seen that to this point yet. You saw him against double teams have real problems. And that showed up against some of our divisional opponents where you have to work against double teams. He could move laterally, but it was just like, even if he's leveraged, he doesn't have the base to do it. He's getting wide, but he's just getting turned. I mean, it's like he doesn't have the build to settle in here. And he also doesn't have the initial pop where it's like he's pushing dudes back and he's settling in and holding his ground. Like, no, he's just leaning on his movement. So he's doing what he can because like, I got to get to the A gap and I got to hold this. So I'm just going to run with it. And it's like, hey, I give it to you. Like, a dude's trying to find a way to make it work. And as a team, you're like, hey, he's trying. Like, it's doesn't look great. It maybe doesn't go above and beyond, but at least he's doing his job. So I'll give him that, as much as there's limitations there. And in terms of like how stout he is, like the run defense was shaky at times, no doubt. But to me, I mean, we even saw with his fast hands, like he won early, and that would set up the rest of the reps. So Pat O'Connor this past season, I don't know if I even put his stats on here. I don't think I put his stats on here actually, but he was kind of like our 3 technique defensive tackle in our undersets, which would essentially mean the strength was on the weak side of the formation. For me, I think he's best built to be a D end. I don't know that he has the looseness to really open up much there as a defensive end, or even any kind of speed around the arc, which is going to allow him to be much of a threat. I think that's why the interior works, because it allows him to translate to have like an advantage over centers. And he does have enough leverage where he could potentially be a little bit of a pocket pusher, but ultimately it's a weird fit. It is. It's a weird fit. But at worst case, if you put Pat O'Connor out there, as my man says, he's going to give effort, and I can rock with those guys. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of guarantees here. But if there was a guy like after last year that we're like, all right, we can bring him back. Pat O'Connor's one of those. All right, last guy we're going to get to before Morris and touch on him shortly. Let's go to Muhammad, Al-Quadin Muhammad. I still don't know how to say his name, so I'm just going to say Muhammad. I've heard other people say it, and it sounds way cooler than that. Sorry, I apologize. I don't say names cool, I guess. Let's go to Muhammad, because this is the one, maybe outside of Shane Zylstra. I mean, I think Craig, there's always a safe bet to say he's going to make the team, but I think Muhammad is a very intriguing re-signing. Right? I think he absolutely deserved to be re-signed. Like, he was deserved to. And I think especially like as time has gone on, the more you continue to look at the edge market, the more you're like, not great. Like, it's not great. There's not a lot of good players out there. I'm going to be honest. It's just not a great edge market this year. And as we get to week 2, it really wasn't great. Like, it was limited. So I'm not surprised at all that it comes at this time. That if the Lions weren't like entering free agency saying, oh, we got to bring him back. And it was like, hey, he wants to go see what's out there. Maybe he can find a better opportunity elsewhere, because, you know, we know who our starters are going to be. But ultimately, maybe he doesn't get that opportunity. The Lions are kind of sitting back like, it wouldn't be the worst move to bring him back for depth. And I think if they continue to stay off of Zadarius Smith, which, again, I've given my thoughts on that, they don't bring him back, Muhammad is a kind of the opposite. Like, I think there's more limitations as a pass rusher because he is stiff as heck. Like, that feels like he doesn't have much flexibility whatsoever. The bend feels super limited. He's super stiff. And he's not like the most explosive athlete where you feel like you're making up for it, where he's just bodying dudes. Like he get a little bit of knockback, but he's not that. Like he's not overwhelming in that category either. He does have some length to his game, which is nice. But ultimately, it's to me the run defense. This is the area where I look at this and say, well, hey, the one thing I knocked about Za'Darius was he would do his job, but could he go above and beyond his job? And I think if you look at Muhammad specifically, I'm not saying he's like an elite run defender, but there's a couple things here. Number one, he got better. By the time we got to the end of the year, the last 4 or 5 games, really maybe 4 last quarter of the season that he played in, he was a good run defender. He was a plus run defender for us. And I always say, you guys know my offseason, like, yo, what do I want to add in the offseason? I was like, we got to get better against the run. That's like first and foremost. How would we do it? We need to get better against the run. And Muhammad got better against the run individually. So I can give him credit from that sense alone. Like, he got better. And you can see it on film. He got smarter as a player. I think he's more disciplined as a run defender. And he has this attacking mindset to his game, both as a pass rusher and his run defender, where it doesn't have to look pretty, but he's going to fight. Like, after watching Muhammad back this past season, I kind of forgot how just nasty he was. Like, he's going to battle dudes. He's going to find a way to get there. And I think as a run defender, that's the thing that shined most. I took so many notes when watching back Muhammad. Now, let me give you some numbers, all right, because this past season, he did have 24 pressures on 250 pass rush snaps, which is, about one shy being 10% of the time he's creating a pressure. Now, in fairness, he kind of did that against basically 2 teams. I think it was Minnesota once. He had 6, maybe Minnesota twice. He did that in like a couple of games. He racked up majority of his pressures, in fairness. So he's not an elite pass rusher, right? He's not. But and he only had 2 against Washington. But again, that comes back to stopping the run for me overall. And he didn't play the run poorly in that game when he was on the field. He actually played 39 snaps in that game. He had 7 stops on the year. Again, 2 pressures against Washington and 39 snaps. But he was strong against the run the end of the season. And I think that there is a little bit more nuance to his game right now. Now, he's older. He's 30 years old. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, like when you put Za'Darius and you say, okay, and you put Muhammad's not like a 23-year-old. You're like, oh, well, he's got more upside. That's why we kept him. You're keeping Muhammad for a reason. You're bringing him back for a reason. There's a reason the Lions like this guy. And to me, it's the way that he plays the game. It's the tenacity that he plays, which to me, I think the Lions are saying, we'll buy into seeing if that gets better, because he did get better throughout the season. I can point to when things got really ugly as a run defense, Muhammad went the opposite direction. He got better as a run defender. And that's something that's not easy, because typically when things go bad around you, everything goes bad. And it's like, defense struggling against run. Muhammad's probably all struggling against run. It was the opposite. He's like, I'm getting better as a player against run. And I'm just like clicking up in terms of I'm going to give even more effort. And that's the kind of thing that stood out. He showed a forceful entry in terms of his take on. Like, I was watching him against Minnesota today. Cam Robinson at left tackle tries to hinge block kind of an outside zone. I mean, he just rams into the dude. And this is what I was talking about, going above and beyond. It may not be as consistent, and he's also not built to be as consistent here. He's not like super strong seemingly. But ultimately, he did play his outside gap, right? Played the C gap, and he pressed into the B gap and made a stop. That's the kind of thing that I didn't get out of Za'Darius as often. Not that way, not that style through the block. So I gave him credit for doing things like that. He also does bring enough flexibility where we've seen him be comfortable when he drops in his own coverage. He's violent with his hand usage specifically as well, but he keeps working. He keeps working as a pass rusher. He finds ways to get there. And you see the lack of flexion. Like, I saw him, it was another Minnesota play where a tight end gets a block on him, and he's trying to turn the corner, and he really can't. But it's the way that he enters which allows everything to happen. He enters first. He's violent. He attacks. There's a little bit of a short area burst, which does show up off the ball, which is something. He doesn't have a ton of speed around the arc, but there's enough burst there where when he gets off the ball and he enters into contact, he can get there first, kind of set guys back a little bit, and then he's sudden. He works off it. He's active, and he's trying to get around the corner. He can't bend or get off the guy because he has this doesn't have any flexibility to do so, but he's just working him all the way back to the pocket, just finding a way to get an edge and just pull him back to the quarterback with him. That's the kind of thing that he was. I don't think his core strength is great. I don't think his speed to power really shows up much as a pass rusher specifically. I thought he showed some false movement as a run defender. Like, you would even see some, and again, discipline issues, but I think this was maybe more discipline in terms of anticipation, like guys that recognize run scheme. Oh, here's 2 pullers. How am I going to play that? He felt like there was false movement. Like, I don't know if I'm playing that correctly. Kind of just stepping inside. Like, that doesn't feel great. But the flip side is it's not that he would like get himself out of the way. Like, I don't want contact. He was looking and searching for contact specifically. And again, I think that's something that's just noticeable on film. Regardless of how that produces statistically, it's noticeable when you watch him. So I think, and here's the biggest part, he had a plan. He at very least had a plan as a pass rusher. He had a variety of things that he could try to get to. He had a rip move that had some success specifically because it was so violent. He had a little bit of a swim move. You would also see the club move that could get set up. There was a skip club that could be effective a little bit as well. he played really tight to offensive linemen. He closed airspace and shrink it really quickly. And while he didn't have the speed around the arc, he could play and win within small spaces. Ultimately, I wish he had a little more power. I wish he was a more fluid pass rusher in the way that he would string things together. And I wish he had more bend to his game, or he had a better get off. And it was like there was something that I could really be like, that's awesome. That thing is really going to translate. I don't know that he has that. I don't know that he has that in any part of his game. But he got better. He got better as a run defender. He had a plan as a pass rusher. And I think, again, if you look at this today, you take the edge rusher market and you look at who's available, it's fair to say Muhammad makes a lot of sense, because one thing Lions needed was, and it has moved up now to my number 2 need, and not coming into the offseason, but has moved there. They need a backup behind Hutchinson. And I'm not saying that, like, ideally, oh, yeah, Hutchinson's backup is Muhammad. Like, ideally, you'd add somebody else, and it'll probably come through the draft, and it'll probably be a relatively high pick. But in the meantime, you really didn't have a body there. I mean, we could say who Goudet is, but again, I don't know that Goudet is even a lock to make the team. I feel much more comfortable saying I think Muhammad can make the team. I don't think he's a lock. I think he can make the team. So you add a guy like this, at very least in the meantime, you have someone behind Hutchinson that has the body type and the flexibility to play there. Now, I kind of went over here, but I did want to touch Quentin Morris, who the Lions are apparently had a visit with from Buffalo. Let's remember, Buffalo has a loaded tight end room, okay? Buffalo is not like we don't have dudes. I don't know why he's not playing. They have dudes. So there's an understandable reason why he's not playing. And actually, if you look at him, he's weird because he didn't run a lot of routes this past year, but he ran 28 routes against, he ran 28 against New England. And in that New England game, he had 4 receptions. So the game that he actually was given the opportunity, which was the end of the year, they're playing other backups. So that's why he was out there. He was productive. Now, his route tree wasn't super diverse. You'd see him run some curls. I thought the deeper his routes guy, you just didn't see much separation. He'd run some drag routes, things like that. But at very least, there was some reliability, it felt like, within his hands. He's never been a high productive guy, kind of like Kenny Yeboah. Never been a high productive guy. He's got a little bit of underhand technique to him. He's got a powerful build to his game as well, specifically. And I think he moves pretty well because, I saw him throw him a screen in that game. I think that he has a little bit of make you miss. He can at very least create some work after the catch. Like, he's not special there, but he can do some things once the ball gets in his hand, which I always like that little aspect. I just don't think that he was consistent creating a latch in space, finding a way to create contact and sustain blocks in space as much as Kenny Yeboah, I thought, was, from the little that I've watched so far. I didn't feel like there was much burst out of his routes. I didn't feel a lot of agility as a route runner. I think it really limits the route tree. So this is a 6'2", 250-pound tight end that, for me, was in a loaded tight end room. I can understand why the Lions would look at that and say, hey, he didn't really get an opportunity. I understand the real reason why. And if the Lions ultimately do bring him in, I don't think just because he's on a visit, it means, oh, that's a lock. That's tight end 3. From what I've seen so far, I bet on Kenny Yeboah before I bet on Quentin Morris. But I think he just adds to the competition. And everybody in their own right kind of has the same thing. He'd be the most unique out of those 3 because Shane is a better separator in terms of he brings more to the table, I think, there. But all of them, I think the Lions are clearly looking for what type? A guy that can block in the second level, be a really nice move blocker, maybe do some work after the catch. All 3 of them. Shane's got the most to work on as a blocker, but I think he showed a lot of promise last year. He obviously has the most up as a receiving option right now. Kenny Yeboah, probably the best move blocker I've seen so far out of all 3 of those. But as a pass catcher, you need more reliability. And I feel like when I watch Quentin Morris, I feel more reliability. I maybe don't feel the upside as a receiving option beyond very simplified routes. But he has the build to be a move blocker and an inline blocker. I just didn't feel as much success there as I did with Kenny. So I think this just adds a 3 tight end room of competition this offseason. And it's going to be one of the more fun competitions to watch this offseason. So that is where, and by the way, side note, Mitchell Goudet was an exclusive rights free agent. They didn't tender him as an exclusive rights free agent. Maybe they just made that decision later because that tender window passed, I believe. So I guess maybe they just made the decision later. So could that mean that they were after something else? Or maybe they just weren't sure if they wanted to bring him back. And then ultimately we need the depth. Let's go bring him back. That could mean that they were looking at something else in free agency and it just didn't happen. So ultimately that was kind of a fallback plan. But I think, again, I don't think he's a lock to make the team. So I think if anything, it was maybe there was a prove it deal they were thinking about signing. There was a couple of guys maybe they had on the radar. I was like, oh, we get them as a prove it deal maybe. Then ultimately maybe the guy got paid too much or just didn't fall through and he went somewhere else. So they just said, all right, we don't need to worry about that. It didn't happen. We'll bring a Goudet back for competition because I think that's where this is going to land. But ultimately, man, those are the latest moves outside of the proposed rule changes by the Lions, which, by the way, I like them both. I like them both. I got to be honest. The wild card and division winner changes. And then also we have the other changes, which is, or not the changes, but the rules are trying to implement, which is, hey, no free first downs. All right. If it's 5-yard holding defensively, fine. We're not giving you a first down on top of that. And I'm personally with that. But ultimately, I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate y'all joining over on Bleacher Report, man. Tune in Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, same time, and we're going to be live. Until then, I'm out. All right, y'all. So that's the end of that show. I had clips, but unfortunately I couldn't show them as I was talking about the players because, like, if I showed them, it would throw off both streams. I don't know why that was a thing. I don't know. I had clips ready, but it is what it is. I don't think they want clips over there anyway, so it's fine. I hate that I couldn't show them while we were sitting here live, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But I will say before we get out, I do want to kind of touch on the rule changes that the Lions were like thinking or like asking about. I think that they're both interesting. Like as a fan, I'm like, dude, I kind of like both of these, and I can understand. This is to Shane Zylstra when I was talking about. Oh, it was against Jacksonville. I had the wrong team there. As a fan, I don't hate the Division One because I think all of us get frustrated when we look at it and we see that, hey, this team plays in a trash division, right? So they get a top 4 seed because they won the division. It's like I don't have an issue with the division winners automatically getting in, but from where I understand it, maybe I'm understanding it wrong. It's just about seeding. So if you win 9 games, win your division, or 8 games, win your division, because we've seen that, you can still get in the playoffs, but it doesn't guarantee you get in a home game if your division's trash, because I think ultimately you could just take advantage then of a bad division. Now, I think there's definitely downsides to that because it feels like there's also downsides to that too, because if you're in a bad division, then you may not be taking it. If you're in a bad division, you should be able to take advantage of the division because that's 6 of your games. So you should win more games, which ultimately should lead to you getting a higher seed, winning your division or not. So, but I think ultimately, if anything, that just kind of supports better divisions. It supports better divisions because the first seed, the top team, anyways, is going to get the playoff spot anyway. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I didn't have an issue with that one, but the other one was, the other one was perfect. The Lions saying like, "Yo, I think it was illegal contact and defensive holding. Like that's not an automatic first down." I love that. If that becomes a thing, which it won't, I would be so happy. I would love for that to become a thing. Like I'm just absolutely like the problem with that rule specifically is the plays that you get when it's like 3rd and 15 and you get a defensive holding that's not in the play. It's one thing if it's pass interference. It's one thing if he held him early and he threw the ball that direction. But it's when it's not involved in the play, that dude gets the flag, pass is thrown completely somewhere else. It's incomplete, and it's like, oh, that guy got a 5-yard penalty. That's the first down. I hate that stuff. It's kind of the same way, like in flip side, I always think that pass interference, I would prefer it be 15 yards like college and not spot of the foul. Like I feel like it's crazy. It changes everything. Or maybe there's a limiter that you could throw on top of that. I get the flip side where people would argue like, oh, okay, well then teams on 3rd and long are just going to be super, super aggressive, knowing that they're okay with giving up the flag. And that's true, right? But ultimately, you may run out of plays there. I mean, that would be the concern. But ultimately, like it's still a flag. It's still 5 yards. Still replay it down. You just don't get the automatic first down. So I can understand why there's problems with it. But if it's an illegal contact or defensive hold, it's not happening when the ball's in the air. So this is all before the ball's thrown. So I think in most cases, I'd prefer that to be the rule. And I know what Lions are doing this. We all know. Lions want to play like this. I mean, they were told us last year, Aaron Glenn, that like essentially, hey, we're going to continue to be aggressive. They're not going to throw flags all game. That's how we're going to play this. We're closing airspace. And the Lions got flagged a lot last year. Now it got a lot better towards second half of the season. DJ Reed has gotten flagged a pretty good amount of times. I think he was flagged 11 times this past season. So I understand stylistically where Lions like, yes, this is the new rule. But even as a fan, like I don't think they're going to change it because I think the NFL loves scoring. And I think we see that in the kickoff rules. I don't think they're going to change it because the automatic first downs keeps drives alive. It allows more points in theory. So I don't think they'll do it. I think if anything, though, the NFL needs to go backwards and try to limit scoring. I think last year it actually took a step back, but that's where I'm at with it. I'm cool with giving any kind of rules in favor of the defense because it feels like they have none in favor of them, especially with all the roughing the passer goofiness. Like, okay, if you're going to give me all the roughing the passer goofiness that happens all the time where a guy taps somebody on the head and it's 15 yards, okay, or he tackled him low. Like, if you're going to give me all that, at least give me the pushback where I can be physical in coverage. At least add an element to that, right? I mean, at least give me something there. Because people were talking about, like, oh, you only can run certain coverages. Like, at least give me the element where I can be physical with dudes. And it's not like I can just be physical and get away with it. There's still a flag. It's just not as detrimental. So at least it opens up the opportunity for me to play with more physicality because I understand I'm not going to cost my team a first down on 3rd and 15 because I want to, try to press him off the ball. Like, I'm with it. 100% with it. 100% with it. I don't know. I don't think it's going to change. I'm 100% with it. Off topic. Reported Lions are interested in Oladipo. Oluwafemi Oladipo. That wouldn't surprise me at all. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Former linebacker goes to edge rusher. I think he had a really nice season this past year. He's a pretty well-rounded pass rusher as well. I could see a path where he became a day 2 player. I don't think he's a day 1 guy at all, but I think there's a path. I think he could get to day 2. I think simulators have him usually round 4 or day 3. I think there's a path for him to get into a day 2 potentially, where someone buys into that upside because he was productive enough last year where he's like just making that transition, and he felt like there was enough of a plan as a pass rusher where a team could buy into. Like, this isn't that far away. Like, we can get it there. And he's also got a great build to his game as well. He's got some bend to his game. He's got length. Like, I'm a fan of Oladipo as well. He was in one of our mock off seasons or mock drafts. He's in one of the 2. I don't know. We've done a few now. He's in one of those things, but I'm sure they are. Like, I don't doubt it at all. I always try to be careful with news like that at this time, just because I know that it's the draft time. Like why would as a team would I be like, hey, everybody, it's my guy right here? Like, no, I'm not letting that get out there. Like, well, okay, if it was, but on the flip side, I might be like, oh, it's my guy. I'm gonna go get him. Like, I don't know who's reporting these things. Maybe someone like got in there and figured it out, but like, everything around the draft I try to be cautious of. But if it was true, and if it is true, I don't doubt it. Yeah, guy from UCLA. I think that's who he's talking about. Unless he's talking about someone else, and I apologize about that whole thing I just said. Fadil Diggs from Syracuse. I do have to check him out. I don't know who that is. I was watching an edge rusher yesterday from Miami. So I started watching him yesterday. And I also started watching Hancock out of Ohio State yesterday, who plays slot corner. So I'm trying to get everywhere, like touch on. And I feel pretty good. Like, honestly, day 2, I feel like I could give a little bit of a prompt on pretty much every player from what I've seen. Like, I feel pretty safely about that. Like, I might be able to do that already. Everything outside of that is where it gets messy. And you always get day 3 dudes that you expect to be day 3 that get to day 2. So it throws you off. And I don't want to be that this year. I'm going to try not to, but some will. It's just how it goes, especially the Lions when they're drafting dudes out of like colleges that aren't even in America. That does throw you off. O'Connor, Muhammad, Nowatzki, Pittman, and Agude are guys we know more about because last year's injury. Silver lining to the injuries. That is true. That is true. Now, did they bring back Trevor Nowatzki? I don't know that it actually happened officially. Did it happen? I'm honestly forgetting now. Maybe it did happen. I'm just forgetting it. I wanted to bring him back, but I don't think they did. Let me check. I don't think they actually officially brought him back. I would have brought him back. Trevor Nowatzki. Let's see. Oh, they did. Wait. Yeah, they did bring him back. Okay. That's good. When did that happen? Like, I don't remember that happening. I don't know. Oh, it was a week ago. Okay. It was a week ago. Oh, that's because he was an ERFA. That's why. Okay, that's because Agude didn't get tendered. He did get. Okay, see, that's why I always brought him back. I always bring back those dudes that are ERFAs because, like, shoot, I know what he's going to be. There's no risk of it bringing back. That's why. Yeah, that's good though. Like, I'm happy about Nowatzki being back. Honestly, all of them. I think that Muhammad has the best chance to get the most guarantees, potentially with O'Connor. I think O'Connor may have the best chance to get the most guarantees, if anything guaranteed. I mean, obviously, Nowatzki doesn't have anything guaranteed there. Pittman's got a lot to prove because I think they're trying to figure out what position he's actually going to play outside of special teams, but they know he's super effective on special teams. He could make the team not by playing defense. He can make the team by never playing defense, and he could still make the team. He's that productive in special teams. And it's not just that he plays a lot of snaps. He's actually really good on special teams. He plays a very valuable role that plays the one position. I can't think of what we used to call it. We used to actually label them out. Obviously, he's a linebacker, but like Sam linebacker, you'd call him. But he played like the one position a lot, or maybe the 2, like the 1 and 2, like right next to the kickoff specialist. So he was very valuable because he created a wall there. So I think he could make the team just by that alone. And then, yeah, Miles Adams. Miles Adams is sneaky because of where the depth was at. He'll be another, competing to make the spot. But Miles Adams actually has some real upside there. Like, I think he's got a lot of upside, especially as a pass rusher. And then, yeah, Muhammad. I think he makes a lot of sense based on where the edge market's at now, as touched on. And then Agude, I think, is not at all locked to make the team, but I have no issue with them trying to see him again in the preseason. Like, imagine if he took a step. he took a step in the preseason. If he ended up on a practice squad and he took a step this year, I'd be really comfortable with him having a step in at some point because that's how it usually goes. Could he? He's going to be hard for him to make the team right now. There's a chance because we haven't had an edge in the draft yet. It's going to be hard for him to make team, but there's enough flexibility where at very least he can play some different spots, play on the ball, play hand in the dirt, stand up role. But if he took a step in the preseason, kind of put some things together, it'd be nice to keep him around. Just curious to see when Aleem comes back. That's it, man. That's the big question, right? Like, is when with him. I'm definitely more comfortable now with Levi back. I feel good about that. And then, throw Roy Lopez in there, Miles Adams, helps that a little bit. Pat O'Connor, because he literally would play everything. We feel better now with where we're at. But, dude, I was talking to Easy, and I was looking through some of these offensive linemen, and I was telling him, like, bro, you forget how good Aleem McNeil is. You know what I mean? At least I do. You watch some of the better guards that are available right now. Watch him against us when Aleem McNeil was healthy. Aleem was torching these dudes, bro. Aleem looks different. It was I wasn't even trying to watch for him. And you watch for the other guy. And you get done, and you're like, all right, I see why Aleem got paid. Like this, it makes sense why he got the money he got. And Wingo, yes, Wingo. I'm curious on Wingo this year. What is he going to play? We're going to do like a breakdown of Wingo at some point. I want to see what he does for us this season. Inside, outside. I mean, maybe early more inside, but eventually outside. We got some depth now. We got a lot of depth, dude. We got a lot of depth. And I think that I guess I can leave it here, but to the extent of, hey, fill out holes, give yourself flexibility in the draft. The Lions legitimately now are kind of right there on the defensive line. I feel like across the board, nose tackle, they got 3 guys. 3 tech with Aleem McNeil. They're pretty loaded too, right? They defensive tackle. I mean, they have like 5 dudes. So you feel, you got Levi now who will play in there. Wingo, Pat O'Connor will play in there, both spots, play really everywhere. Miles Adams put you at 4. Am I forgetting somebody obvious? I don't think so. So you got like 7 dudes between those two. And then at defensive end, like Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, Marcus Davenport. I can't count Levi inside and outside, but I mean, you kind of can because they are going to play these different spots. Marcus Davenport, Aiden Hutchinson. You could throw a Goudet into there, I guess. But I would actually probably throw Pat O'Connor there behind Aiden Hutchinson. So, we did a nice job. At least there's dudes here. We can work with what we got. But yeah, they're gonna add it. There's no doubt they're gonna add an edge in the draft or defensive end. Hopefully Pascal. That's who I was forgetting. Pascal. There you go. See, so you throw Pascal and you throw Davenport, and that's not even counting Levi or Wingo, who can play defensive end too, or Pat O'Connor, who might be his best there. Like you have that, and then Hutchinson, and now you get who I think is now the backup, like the legitimate backup behind Hutchinson on the roster right now, to me is Muhammad. He's the actual backup behind Hutch now. We'll see if it, I don't think it'll last, but like right now he's the backup. So that move is massive to get to have an actual backup on the roster because we just didn't have one. And it was like, Ramsey doesn't really have a lot to offer here. It is going to throw a pick at somebody. So look, man, they did a nice job. Free agency, they're really freed up for the draft. Can we get a corner next? Because then it's like, he could be immediately productive. If he's not immediately productive, like week 1, and he's got to kind of work his way into it, you're going to have dudes there. Can we get a corner next or a safety video? A corner or safety video? If we do, I'm not sure which one would be more likely, to be honest. It'd probably be more likely that we did a corner video, but it may be a guy that does both. I think that it may be more likely to get like a nickel / safety video, something like that. Because I'm going to start to try to get to some of these day 2, day 3 guys. So something like that. And those videos will be quicker because I'll have the breakdowns, but I'll just kind of fly through like man zone, that kind of thing. So that's probably, I'm not going to guarantee that that'll happen next, but it would make sense that it does. Like they're coming soon. Allen Robinson, Equanimeous St. Brown are still out there. Yeah, I don't know if Allen Robinson is going to play. I had heard that he was thinking about retiring. I don't know if new things came out of that. I understand the St. Brown intrigue. I don't know that he is actually a very good player, but I get it. I feel like if the Lions felt he was a good player at some point, he would have been signed because he's been available last couple of off seasons. I feel like, no disrespect. It's just and I also like wide receivers. None of the examples. You throw Tim Patrick in, it's like, all right, I feel pretty good at receiver. Khalif, Tim Patrick, Jameson, St. Brown, Ronnie Bell, Antoine Green. It's like you feel pretty good about receiver too. Like that's pretty open. You can hit in the draft. You can, that's pretty good. They're in a pretty good spot here. Tight end's the same way now. Tight end's loaded. It went from like, dude, we need a tight end 3 for a while. It's just we need a third tight end. Now it's loaded. So we're in a good spot, man. Yeah, I think I'm gonna end this here. And we're gonna have another breakdown video hopefully coming soon. That's the next thing to probably come out. What's wrong with Ojulari? Only 4 million. I think he's overrated. I think other teams understand. Here's how I look at it. And I think overrated in this sense. He's productive, but I didn't think his productive was that impressive. I didn't think the way that he earned his production is sacks. Like, if you just watch his sacks, just watch his sacks. I don't think you're blown away with how he created those sacks. The number 2 issue, and it's not that he's not worthy of being brought in. 4 million still, it's not bad money. I mean, 4 million, depending on how that cap number set up, that could be higher than Marcus Davenport, right? So it's not bad for a prove it deal. But I think also there's obviously limitations as a run defender. There's limitations as his build, his fit as a run defender. There's a specific role that he kind of has to plug into. So that always, I think, hurts your ultimate value. Is like, all right, is there like a specific? Because if I have to like point it, if I have to look at you as an outside linebacker, Caleb Von Chasen, if I have to look at you, maybe even James Pierce, but Pierce I think plays the run a little bit better. But if you are looked at as an outside linebacker, you better be an animal as a pass rusher to get legitimate money. I would say this: look at Baron Browning. I would argue Baron Browning's a better pass rusher than Azeez Ojulari, especially before he got traded to Arizona, who had, I think, Ojulari at one point. But I think Baron Browning's a better pass rusher, but he's kind of in the same boat where he went from off ball to on ball. He's undersized. It's kind of a weird fit. You don't feel a lot of that power element to his game. I don't feel that with Ojulari either. I think it just makes it tough. You better stand out as an edge rusher. And Ojulari had production. He's a better finisher. I think maybe probably a lot of the other guys out there. I never bought into it though. Like, even at the trade line, we needed edge. I wasn't on board with it. By roster, we have top 5 D. Do you think a new D coordinator will get us there? I'm kind of on. I think we can get better with Kelvin Sheppard, and that's not disrespect to Glenn. I just think if we were the same defense and we continue to take steps, because I feel like every year we've taken steps, I think we could be better. And let's also keep in mind this. I was thinking about this. We've obviously improved the roster every year. It feels like defensively, outside of last year when everybody got hurt, and Glenn did a great job of kind of keeping that together. Like, Glenn has gotten better. Glenn was fantastic this last year. He was fantastic. I thought by far, hands down, was his best year defensively. So there's a real ability for that to take a step back because it is a new guy. But I would also say, as the defense has gotten better roster-wise, the rankings has consistently gotten better, especially in the back end. Back end has gotten better every year by far, statistically. Run defense has taken a step back, but it's still in a manageable spot. But that's also been in turn with the roster getting better. So I do think with how much we missed last year as a run defender, if we were more healthy in the front 7, our run defense probably would have been closer to what it typically is. And you combine that with what the secondary was playing like, especially when they were more so healthy. I mean, more interceptions and touchdowns. That's been on a steady incline to one of the best in football, especially if they pass this rule where, hey, there's no automatic first downs. Like, the roster's gotten better. So it's kind of both. Like, I think Glenn's was fantastic, and I also think that the roster keeps getting better. There's also reason to believe into, like, hey, Kelvin Sheppard can keep this thing afloat. If not, maybe he can make it better. Maybe he has some wrinkles that, we were missing last year. And I think, I don't know if you guys watched the coaching hiring video the Lions put out with, like, Casey Rogers, and they're kind of going through all the assistant coaches. Like, we could be better. I think we could be better. I definitely think we could. Even Shea Townsend was massive. We're just going to get better there, hopefully, because of growth. But, like, defensive line, I definitely think we can get better there. I think we can get better. I think we can get better at linebacker. That's been on a huge uptake with Jack Campbell. So, like, individually, our positions have gotten better and better, it feels like. Brian Branch was better at safety than nickel last year if we can keep him there. So, individually, our positions got better. Just as a whole, as a unit, the separating factor will be, to me, in-game decision-making. Kelvin Sheppard versus Aaron Glenn. What does that look like? And you'd probably be safer betting on Aaron Glenn, but there's a chance that Kelvin's fantastic. Overall, man, I'm going to leave it there. As we stay healthy, we still have the best roster. It's a tough roster, man. It's a good roster. That's what I'm saying, bro. We have a good roster. Like, we got a good roster. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited about all of this. And I don't know if you guys saw I put, what's interesting? So that video I posted like 2 days ago where I did like the salary cap thing. And I honestly, I used the title because I've been hearing that, like, all Lions are spending money. I didn't want to title it that, but everybody's been saying it. So I'm going to title that. But anyways, that was the Bleacher Report show. So that thing was 15 minutes. I think I put it in the description. That was normally 30 minutes. There's actually more to that. And there was needs that I talked about there too. I just cut it down to 15 and made it that. Today, you can see I just did it live. So we'll see how that goes. But Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. If I'm not here, I'm there. So just so y'all know. But yeah, that was one of those videos that was no plan. I didn't really have a good plan for that video. I kind of just jumped on. And as I was rolling, I was like, oh, this is making some sense here. And they pulled up the contract stuff. That all went now live. Now I cut it down to make it much more efficient because there would have been some like, what is he talking about here? But it came out pretty good once I cut it down. I was like, this is a video. Let me just post this thing. All right. I got a call. So I'm going to answer my call. I appreciate y'all joining, and we will be back with more breakdowns. If you guys have any specific players you want to see, I saw one in the chat. Always feel free, especially you, Charles, to just also send that to me on X so I don't forget the player's name and I don't get like distracted for something else. But if you all want to see something specific, man, just let me know, and we'll stay on top of the news. Appreciate y'all joining, and I will see you guys soon. Hopefully soon. I don't know. We'll see. I'm out. Have a great week, or have a great rest of your Wednesday. Why'd I say that? See, now I got to stop. I can't leave yet. I can't leave on that. Have a great week. We better be back before the week's over. We better be back before the week's over. Have a great rest of your night. I may see you tomorrow. We'll see. I'm out. Okay. That's better. That's way better.